Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webcast from Upland and BlueVenn in partnership with London Research, entitled Modern Marketing Technology and Tactics to Become a CX Leader. By way of an introduction, my name is Linus Gregoriadis. I'm Director and Co-Founder of London Research, and I'll be one of the three presenters for today. London Research is part of Communitize Group, and our sister brands are Digital Donut, the world's largest community of digital marketers, and Demand Exchange, which is a B2B lead generation platform. Before we start, let's quickly run through some housekeeping points. Please note we'll be recording today's webcast and we'll create an on-demand version that will be available soon after the webinar's conclusion. The webinar should last just under an hour. Please do feel free to submit your questions at any time during the session, and we'll endeavour to answer as many as possible during or at the end of the webinar, probably mainly at the end. Questions can be submitted very easily within the On24 webinar interface. So we'll be hearing plenty more from them later with proper introductions, but let's quickly just say hi to our main presenters for today. That's Jim Kelly from BlueVenn and Rue Golding from Upland CXM. Hi, guys.
Hey, Linus.
Nice to be here.
Great to have you on board. So the first thing we wanted to do today was to kick off with an audience poll question to involve you out there listening from the start. So this is the poll question, which really goes to the heart of what we're going to be hearing about today. How do you rate your ability as an organization to solicit customer feedback and then use that feedback to better personalize the customer journey? And the options are excellent, good, bad, non-existent, or not sure. And we'll just give that a few seconds, and then we'll see the results. Okay, so we can see that only 4% say they're excellent at this. So hopefully for the vast majority of you, there'll be stuff you'll be able to pick up and learn from this session. Just over a third categorize yourself as good, but then just under a third say they're bad, 15% say non-existent, and 11.5% say not sure. So as I say, hopefully in this session, there'll be some opportunities to sort of up-level a bit in terms of customer feedback and using that to personalize the customer journey and improve customer experience overall. Okay, so this chart you may or may not be familiar with, but it's Scott Brinker's marketing technology super graphic, which at the last count contains more than 7,000 marketing technologies grouped into different categories, everything from ad tech to CMS to data platforms and e-commerce technologies. So I think what's clear from that is that there's a lot of marketers, a lot of full marketers, customer experience professionals to really be familiar with, and really too much out there to it's a confusing picture, and it is complicated for companies when they're trying to select the appropriate technologies to enable a CX strategy. So what we wanted to do today was to really drill down into two specific areas, and they're the customer data platforms and VOC or voice of customer platforms. So we really believe that if you're using those two technologies in harmony, you have a real opportunity to become a customer experience leader. And in these turbulent times, when as consumers we're increasingly demanding either consciously or subconsciously great customer experiences, you need to be delivering. Otherwise, as consumers, we're going to be getting bored and moving on to another brand. So both CDPs, VOC have only really been in, I guess, mainstream marketing consciousness for around 4 or 5 years, but are already probably in their second or third phase of their maturity and at a stage where they have the potential to really deliver huge value, presenting an opportunity for you as organizations to differentiate yourselves from your competition by really focusing sharply on the customer and his or her needs. So we're now going to look at the famous Gartner hype cycle and both these technologies in that context. So I think this is a really useful framework to understanding how technologies emerge over time and mature, and actually in some cases disappear altogether. So they in essence, they look at the Gartner hype cycle, looks at how these, I guess, the life cycle of these technologies, and also they relate to the outcomes you can expect to see over time. If we think about CDPs, it was really probably in around 2013 when they became properly defined as a technology category. We start off, as we can see in this chart, with the innovation trigger, and that really kicks off the hype that we then go on to see. And this is characterized by two key things. Firstly, marketers will start to be intrigued at the new and shiny tools that can help them to differentiate. The hype begins. Publishers start to talk about it. Tech vendors rebrand their products or start to build functionality to enable them to meet the hype. And ultimately, the early adopters buy CDP tools, or sometimes what they think are CDP tools, but aren't really. Secondly, as marketers start to ask questions related to the new technology and vendors start hearing about it in RFIs and tenders, they start to move the branding of their products and latch onto the hype because there's money to be made from customers who are keen to jump onto the bandwagon. So we then hit a saturation point called the peak of inflated expectation, where everyone steps back and starts thinking, hang on a minute, what tangible business value is this providing? What use cases is it solving? Who's seeing success? Why are there so many players in the market that seem to do different things? So there's a bit of a struggle to articulate the value, and we move into what's called the trough of disillusionment, or the pit of doom. Okay, so maybe it's not a pit of doom, but certainly marketers start to get to the end of their early adoption, and they're really, I guess, scratching their heads to prove ROI. But then we get a situation where the market starts to consolidate a bit. Some of the vendors who can't really meet the true definitions of the technology fall off, and we end up with some of the truest vendors in terms of that category. So we then ultimately move into the slope of enlightenment and into the plateau of productivity as the technology becomes more mainstream. And if you think about marketing automation, CRM, CMS, or even DMPs, that's data management platforms, they all tend to follow this curve. There's not really a specific time frame for how long these phases take, but I think it's a useful model for understanding where we're at. And at the moment, a lot of people are talking about machine learning and AI, and they're obviously in the earlier stages of that hype cycle. So let's now look specifically at customer data platforms and then voice of customer, or VOC technologies, in terms of this model. This chart here is based on the 2019 edition of the hype cycle for digital marketing. You can see CDP starting to head into the trough of disillusionment after a really significant period of hype. CDPs are a really hot area, and we're seeing on our sort of sister company blogs, Digital Donut, there's a lot of white papers and articles on this topic. It's a hot area, as I say. So what is a CDP? And we've got a nice definition there on the right. So CDPs, to meet the CDP Institute definition of a CDP, they need to ingest data from any source. They need to capture the full detail of that ingested data. They need to store ingested data indefinitely, be able to create unified profiles of identified individuals, and crucially to share data with any system that needs it, whether that's voice of customer tool or something else. So some would describe this really just as the plumbing and just data, but ultimately it's the data you put into the CDP, and then what you do with that data, which becomes the basis of how you derive actual real value and enhance the customer experience. So if you can put in, say, CRM data, ESP data, and transactions into your CDP, you can get a single customer view from those three sources. But if you're going to then be able to add more sources, you get a more holistic customer view, and more the value increases with the more data and platforms you tie in with that. Okay, that's enough on CDPs for now. We can now look at voice of customer technologies in the context of the hype cycle for digital commerce from 2019. And we can see here that last year we're in the trough of disillusionment with a plateau of productivity expected to be a few years away. And again, I think it's useful to define what a VOC platform is exactly. So we will give a definition as we did with CDPs. So it needs to deal with channels, so collect customer feedback through multiple channels such as emails, websites, paper, and so on and so forth. There's text messaging as well, voice, mobile applications, in-apps, kiosks, and even computer-assisted telephone interviewing. That's CATI for short. Needs to be able to handle data, collect and analyze three different types of VOC data, and those types of data are the direct feedback, and that's the feedback that consumers intentionally providing to the organization, whether asked to do so or motivated by their experience. And this might be from a survey or a complaint or a user research forum or panel. It might be indirect feedback from where a customer is speaking about an organization, giving feedback to the company. It includes insight from third-party review sites, social networks, and customer care interactions via phone, email, and chat sessions. And the third type of feedback is the inferred feedback. So that's the operational and transactional data associated with a customer experience or customer journey. And a lot of this information is held in operational systems such as CRM or customer service or support tools, or even marketing automation or website databases. And the third thing a VOC tools needs to do is around insight. So provide tools that convert customer feedback into actionable insight through dashboards, alerts, customer journey maps, workflow for service recovery, and capabilities to predict and prescribe relevant actions, because the data is no good unless it becomes actionable. Okay, so hopefully that's a helpful intro into the capabilities of CDP and VOC tools more broadly. I guess I'm really just an analyst with mainly theoretical knowledge rather than sort of hands-on practical experience. So it's great now to be able to hand you over to the real experts. So firstly, we've got Rue Golding, who's VP of Alliances at Upland's Customer Experience Management. Upland enables organizations to deliver outstanding customer experiences and to capture actionable insights through outcome-driven conversations that are dynamic, personalized, and engaging across all channels. He'll then pass to Jim Kelly, who's Principal Consultant at BlueVenn, who we know very well as one of the leading orchestration CDPs for both unifying data and enabling cross-channel marketing automation. So firstly, over to you, Rue.
Linus, thanks very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all safe, sane, and well wherever you are in the world. Housekeeping-wise, if you can lock up your kids and partners in the respective areas of the house, that'd be great. So thanks, Linus. Just going to take you through Upland CXM's point of view around customer experience, which really blends nicely with what Linus was talking around. And I see the combination of a VOC program, a CDP, and those execution channels as being a real key differentiator for winning in customer experience. You know, Linus has called out there a couple of points around converting feedback into actionable insight. Fundamentally, at a voice of the customer layer, that's certainly what CXM provide through our voice of the customer programs. But making it truly actionable and taking that insight and data and making it actionable within a CDP, I believe is really strong part of that marketing mix. So I'm just going to take you through, you know, how we view the state of the nation in terms of customer experience, voice of the customer, and that customer engagement layer. So, you know, this is a really fascinating slide of stats because we know, you know, consumers are increasingly becoming more time poor, and there is that need for instant gratification. So it means that hitting the mark from a brand point of view is so crucial at every interaction. A 5% increase in customer retention is going to correlate to, you know, a significant amount of increased profitability. And then looking at the PwC stats there, 86% of buyers are willing to pay for a better customer experience. You know, it's the age of the customer now. We just happen to live there. The power is massively with the consumer, and organizations really need to engage the hearts and minds of the consumer and deliver against those ever increasing and rising expectations. The new normal for customer experience is a very high bar that's set by industry titans that we'll all recognize, those customer-led geniuses, Amazon, Apple, John Lewis, First Direct. And we absolutely believe that, you know, consumers are won and lost, not necessarily by your product or price, but how you are dealing with that customer experience itself. And we talk a lot around making moments matter as well. So clearly making those interactions, that customer experience as supreme as possible is so important. 30% of customers are going to leave that brand after one bad experience. So you've only got one opportunity to either win the hearts and minds or give that consumer a reason to look elsewhere. And we know from lots of research that we are part of a switching epidemic. Trillions of dollars of business is being switched on an annual basis. So ensuring that that customer experience, that data that is fueling that experience and that engagement strategy is surfaced and actioned as much as possible. However, there's still a massive expectation gap. So within the C-suite, the CEOs fundamentally believe they are delivering a far superior customer experience. So this is research that speaks to 80% of those CEOs believe that they are delivering a customer experience, which is supreme. Only 8% of consumers are agreeing. So this speaks to that ever increasing and that rising high bar of expectations from a consumer. And then interestingly, when you're looking at that customer experience and that disparity between what the C-suite believe and the consumers believe, you know, Ed Thompson from Gartner talks about how most large organizations are using over 50 different measures of customer experience within an organization. And then there aren't two same organizations that are using the same metric. So you can start to understand why there are a number of challenges behind getting the actual customer experience right. And then I guess it's understanding how much of the problem you are looking to solve. So, talking to that disparity between the CEO and the consumers again, brands may think they're delivering that superior customer experience. That's just the tip of the iceberg. There are a number of facets around that broader customer engagement process and program that needs to be identified. So proactively engaging audiences. So how are you being able to provide the right content to the right person at the right time through the right channel? How can you help influence purchase decisions? And then looking at how you can deepen and nurture those relationships, creating those advocates and those loyal customers, whilst at the same time being able to, in real time, look at those people who have had a poor experience and then look to close the loop. In the previous couple of slides there, after one bad experience, a consumer is 30% likely to leave your brand. So, if I have the means of being able to rescue that detractor in real time, understand in real time how they feel, and then close the loop with them, that becomes ever increasingly important. And then also, interestingly, and this kind of feeds through into what Jim will talk around as well, mobilizing those advocates within the programs that Upland CXM run. We are looking at understanding who those loyal customers are. Many of you will be familiar with the Net Promoter Score, or CSAT. Certainly from a Net Promoter point of view, you're asking your consumers and your customers, how likely they are to recommend you. And if you've got those top box promoters, what are you actually doing with them? Are you mobilizing them? Are you getting them to be your secret sales force and effectively doing the selling for you? And then down to the point of view that as CXM we hold really strongly in terms of looking at those customer or voice of the customer programs. I would ask for a show of hands, but there's over 500 people on the call, so I'm not going to do that. But as a consumer, how often are you being asked to take a survey? And actually, how often do you take them? And then when you have, are you being given that opportunity to really talk about the things that are important to you? And then taking that on a step, our belief very much is, surveys have a place, but in terms of that real-time transactional interaction that a consumer's having, hitting them with a 15, 20 question survey that you've created doesn't really give the opportunity to the consumers to talk about the things that are important to them. And also typically a survey is going to get a low response rate, and that can become increasingly more dangerous in terms of making strategic or transformational changes within your organization. And finally, it can be a very high-risk strategy for customer retention. By hitting them with a long survey, you're going to get that low response rate, and you're not going to get that silent majority that maybe have a creeping disquiet about your service, your product, your proposition. And so we talk very much around being able to unlock the emotion and the sentiment of that experience. And it's, you could take this away in terms of from a professional and personal point of view, how an interaction leaves you feeling will dictate how you behave in the future. So think about that from a service point of view, how you're left feeling after your digital experience, your face-to-face experience in 3 months' time, perhaps. But then also from a contact center, how you're left feeling there will dictate how you're going to behave in future. So by unlocking that really helps organizations become more predictive. I understand the emotion and the sentiment behind that interaction. If I then correlate that with the data that's held in a CDP, you can really hone in on those loyal customers, that creeping disquiet segment of customers that you might need to apply some attention to. So we talk around capturing the voice of the customer in the moment, capturing insight from as many customers as possible, giving them the opportunity in a very short and fast, quick way of being able to leave that feedback. Hone in on the emotion, and then ensuring you're spanning the entirety of that customer journey. And this is very much the position that kind of drives that. And we're talking around doing it in real time. It's going to give that high response rate. That high response rate gives immediate insight and a really rich understanding of what actually happened within that interaction itself. Hearing it from the horse's mouth, unpicking the emotion of that experience really helps you understand, like I said, how that consumer is likely to act in the future. And it's not the survey approach. It's very much the voice of the customer, and then taking that forward and making that actionable in your marketing initiatives. I know that customer A really liked this about our product or our service. Perhaps there's an opportunity to create a loyalty program around that. Or perhaps there are some issues that were occurring that a number of our customers talked about. Maybe we can set them down a separate journey from a marketing point of view, from a recovery point of view. And then, as I've touched on this, Upland CXM have within our kit bag the capability of being able to reach customers from an email point of view, a digital point of view, an app point of view, SMS. It's being able to span the entirety of that journey to be able to solicit that feedback and the emotion, and then use those same channels to be able to create those personalized and engaging journeys back through that. And a number of you on the call will recognize this as that customer journey, going through those different stages, all those crucial touch points, which are crucial in terms of being able to delight the customer, but scarily, it's almost that opportunity to be able to leave those customers wanting more. So being able to identify all these touch points across that journey give you the opportunity to enrich your existing data with the sentiment that is available to you from a customer experience point of view. And then Gallup have talked about research that really focuses on why you should focus on the emotion. So, our behavior is influenced by emotion more than reason. It's the head over or the heart over mind scenario. And employees are increasingly becoming more impactful in this process as well. So engaging and making sure that the employees are part of a customer experience program is crucial. So when you're speaking to somebody in a contact center, buying something from a retail outlet, if that person isn't engaged in that program, they are the people that are delivering the experience. So it's super important that those guys are taken along on the journey as well. And then this will flow into what Jim will talk about, but this is just a very brief example of an item of feedback. We will ask for a score and then a comment. And the Upland CXM sentiment engine is really looking at that unstructured comment to be able to identify the topics that the customer was talking about, so what was important to them and how they felt about that. And those are the insights that will drive into your marketing programs and help you understand how you can drive positive outcomes and look at that next best action. So, the self-service portal was a nightmare. Okay, is there some recovery that we can do around bringing that customer back into your environment to acknowledge that there was issues, but hey, we listened to you. Here's an opportunity for you to engage with us in a different way. And I think at this point, it's just important to just look at that overall journey. So where is this going to fit? The process that I've talked around, looking at the voice of the customer, the CXM approach to be able to harness sentiment across the journey, be able to execute those personalized campaigns going back out. Those customer-driven journeys are becoming ever more important to that overall marketing process. As lots of researchers are talking about, bridging the gap between all those different operations within an organization, bringing them together to have that unified approach to customer engagement is becoming more crucial. It just enables those brands to be able to harness greater understanding of the customer, which gives the brand the opportunity to be on the front foot in terms of delivering those next best actions. And then conversely, you can look to fix those points that may be creating some attrition within your customer base. So joining the voice of the customer data with your true marketing data, you can understand if there are customers that perhaps are showing a propensity to churn or having issues from a service point of view. And then finally, we talk about those personalized journeys. So making it relevant, engaging, and personalized to the consumer. So using the voice of the customer data, the sentiment of that experience to funnel into that execution layer of your customer journeys. So being able to understand what your customers really like and think and feel about a process or a product or about the brand itself, being able to look to re-engage from a personalized point of view via the different channels that are available to you, will enable you to seek rich rewards from a conversion point of view, generate more advocates, and certainly a long-term loyal customer base as well. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Jim Kelly, BlueVenn, Principal Consultant. Over to you, Jim.
Thanks, Rick. Before we get into my bit, hello and nice to be here. I'd just like to remind you about the ability to ask questions via the panel on screen. If you do have any questions at all as we go through any of the content, please do feel free to ask them. We'll be addressing questions at the end. So again, thank you, Root. For the most part, we've been looking at the voice of the consumer impact for the consumer in the previous half hour of this webinar, and why it's important for businesses to exploit the customer experience management strategy. I'd like to take a moment to look at the impact on the wider business. BlueVenn, we're regularly brought into organizations to help them reduce data flow issues and to mitigate risk with using data. But predominantly, we're brought in to actually make the measurability and the measurements used in these strategies more accurate. And I will come on to that later as to why that's important. But if we take a look at why this is important for businesses and how it can help you deliver a step change across these strategies, and that's where I'm going to be leading on from here. So let's talk for a moment about how the actual conversation flows between your staff, your employees, and your customers. There will be a wide range of business roles in your organization, each performing various different functions, from marketing, e-commerce, right through to servicing and support, largely depending upon if you're B2C, B2B, or B2B2C, but you'll understand that each of these different roles will have quite a large impact on how you help those employees do what they need to do day in, day out. So what we do is, as an organization, we introduce various tools and processes to help our people do their jobs. Journey orchestration or campaign management to aid with automation for the marketing team, CRM tools, perhaps, to help them manage the one-to-one relationship, email and digital platforms for execution and communications, right through to service management technology, and maybe even clienteling systems in store or at the point of sale. Each of these technologies gives you the opportunity to engage through the myriad of communication channels available both now and in the future. We use all of our tools and processes to create content and push it out to these channels, trying to solicit a response and turning those responses into measurable actions. This is really what drives the reason behind a customer data platform. So it doesn't matter if your conversation is about acquisition or prospecting, cross-selling, repeat purchasing, conversion, service management. All of these interactions are key that they are measurable. So here we have channels such as website, email, social media, advertising, retargeting, and so on. On the flip side of the conversation, the content that we create, our part of the conversation, if you like, is consumed by our customers through their own technology means. We'll call these devices, for want of a better term, but these aren't just devices in the digital sense. They also include telephones, for speaking and in-person meetings for face-to-face conversation. This is where we start to lose control as marketeers, by the way. Although we can choose the medium, such as email or advertisement, we actually don't have complete control over how the consumers will consume our content or indeed start a conversation with us. So now we come to that layer, which is finally reaching the customer's voice. This is where the customer is in total control of doing something, starting a conversation, clicking a link, walking in your store, buying a product, returning it, or continuing or ending existing conversations. They are in charge at that point. But their options are really limited to reading, writing, speaking, and going somewhere. Think about a customer visiting your website as being no different to them walking in a store if you have one. They've decided to visit the place where they can interact with your products, with your services, and with your staff. So here it is. This is why so many different platforms, tools, and processes are part of the modern marketeer's world. This is how we manage the end-to-end interactions, conversations, and create and manage the customer relationships. And it's critical to remember that this view is for a single brand. If you're a multi-brand organization, you will have the same conversational structure for every single brand, potentially with different channels, different sites, different technology. This graphic, by the way, highlights the two core competencies of what a customer data platform is supposed to do for you. The primary role is to ingest data that actually represents all of these interactions with the customer and unify it into a single source of the truth accessible to all. The secondary role is trying to be the conduit between each of these layers to give you the power to have joined up, coherent conversations across any channel and any device. It's about activation and unification. And Rue earlier mentioned that large companies can have over 50 metrics to measure the customer experience. So now we've laid out the complex landscape that is the management of your conversation. Let's take a look at measurability, how we measure the performance, the success or the failure, and the impact of our conversations. So when we are measuring people and process, we tend to use classic management techniques, such as reporting, annual reviews. We're looking at revenue by team performance against objectives and those sorts of things. And the closer in on the different layers that we get, the easier these measurements become. So when we're measuring individual technologies, we're looking at response metrics. Is there an effort reduction? These are the ROI things that we put in place when we're trying to justify the implementation of new technology. What is the benefit to my organization? We also look at process improvements and anecdotal evidence, those sorts of things. Channel is actually where it gets a lot easier. Channel is where the technologies help you work. So here we measure, for example, how many emails were sent versus opened, what the click-through percent was, how many times the advert was clicked, how many visits were there on the actual website. Quite key is that this tends to be how most organizations objectivize their marketing team. They tend to be still objectivized around channel performance or ad performance. Now, as you'll see as we go on, that may be a change that you want to make tactically in order to become a leader within the CXM space. So when we reach device, the metrics change because we're kind of limited as to what is legally available to measure. And of course, the underlying device technology may or may not allow us to actually measure it. So, for example, we could look at the number of app downloads, store footfall, We actually use tracking pixels quite a lot historically to measure interaction at the various touch points. But at each layer of the conversation, we put in place measurements, metrics, analysis, and reporting to either prove or disprove that what we're doing is right. Proving this is the cornerstone of all budgeting. If it works well, we spend more money on it. So if the ads work well, we do more advertising. We also use these metrics to optimize results like A/B split testing, next best action, machine learning. All of those things pump into we need metrics to measure and improve. Basically, we use these metrics to make our decisions. But what about the voice of the consumer? What if we could measure this layer? It's the why part of the equation for me that would help me make much better informed decisions. Questions like, why didn't you like my recommendations? Why haven't you bought from me in the last 3 months? Why did you return the product? Why did you delete the app? It's qualitative research that has immense value. If only we could measure it and turn it into quantitative. This is where sentiment, feeling, and insight come in, as well as topics and elements like that earlier mentioned by Ruth. If I could use Net Promoter Score, sure, that would give me a score, a number 1 to 10, or however I want to use it. It actually doesn't tell me why these things have happened. If I could capture the why in your own words as a customer, and I could turn that into a measurable quantitative metrics, I could inform every part of the business, not just marketing. Think back to the people in the conversations, your employees, your colleagues, the customer care team. They can make better decisions with better information. For example, this customer prefers shopping online because the parking near their local store is expensive. I'm not going to get an answer like that out of Net Promoter Score or CSAT. I need to give them the opportunity to actually converse with me, to have a discussion. They won't use the app because the text is too small and they can't read it comfortably. They won't buy that dress because, as a petite person, the length makes them look like a Dalek or a statue. Feedback doesn't just have to come from the consumer, by the way. This is quite key. It can also come from front of house staff, employees, and the customer care advisors, all linked back to the individual and the interaction. This is not just feedback. This is insight. This is the voice of the customer that I want to tap into. It might sound complex, but it really isn't. The hard work of turning qualitative insight into quantitative usable metrics is done by the voice of the consumer platform. It's about mapping sentiment and language to each individual interaction and therefore customer. The magic comes when you elevate the value of that sentiment with a customer data platform. It brings all other facts, metrics, behaviors, descriptors, and predictive models together at multiple levels, at individual, household, store, office, and business level if you're in B2B. So let's briefly take a look at practically how this might look. We're going to just step through a very, very simple structured journey here. So let's take a target of customers, segment, profile, or audience, whatever language you prefer to use. And we're going to target them with an offer. We're going to start a conversation. First, we go through the normal compliance piece. Are they emailable, opted in? Do we have their consent, etc.? We email them if possible, but personalize the website for everybody in the target audience. So basically, everyone is exposed to, providing they have online access, either through email or the internet, a link they can click. This provides us with the traditional measures to see whether they purchased a product or service, just clicked the link, or they did nothing at all and totally ignored us. Now we have our normal metrics. Did the email work? Was the personalization successful on the site? Was the offer good for that segment? Did we generate revenue uplift? Many organizations stop here. If you're not doing the customer experience management piece, this is typically where you'd stop. is our marketing or our operations working? But let's do a simple follow-up if they did purchase. We could, of course, request feedback if they just clicked or they did nothing. But for simplicity, we'll just ask for feedback down the purchase path. So the voice of the consumer track allows us to still be compliant and aware of channel preferences as a marketeer. Because we have all the data in one place, however, we can create a new conversation very easily. But this is designed around omnichannel activation of the voice of the consumer platform. This is about soliciting direct feedback. And that is a classic using CXM in isolation approach. But because we're underpinning that strategy with a customer data platform in tandem, I can segment respondents depending upon whether their score, combined with their natural language, indicated high, medium, or low sentiment, high being positive, low being negative. Furthermore, because I have all the interactions and the historical behavior for all channels for this customer in my customer data platform in the same place, we can access lifetime value, for example, or revenue to date metrics, or the rest of their household. Who do they live with? What lifestyle are they in? As part of the conversation. And I can construct, as a marketeer, a better conversation. Branching out the journey in this case to immediately apply a gesture of goodwill, perhaps it's monetary, perhaps it's softer than that, if the customer is of high value to me, automatically apologizing, of course, to mid and low value customers. But just to round it off, we might actually activate a message to the call center, instigating further feedback vocally if they're high value customers. Please call this customer. Here's just a quick dashboard view that shows how metrics and sentiment values can easily be viewed over time alongside segmentation and attribution if all the data is in one place. This graph quite basically shows for each of the mentioned topics, which you can see across the bottom of the screen with different colored buttons on them, mentioned topics, and how the average weighted sentiment has changed over the last 3 years. We can see what parts of the business work and don't work, but we're seeing them alongside all the other interactions, behaviors, and metrics. Incidentally, this, of course, can be viewed for any segment, group of customers, product, even salesperson in store. So the insight is there. The information is valuable. The question is getting at it. The voice of the consumer is elevated. So we talked about a number of different things, and in summary from me, the measurability is critical, not just to marketing, but of course the entire business. We constantly talk about personalization of creative. I want to personalize email. I want to personalize creative content. But we need to be personalizing the entire experience, which means we're not just personalizing creative, we're personalizing the conversation. If I knew you had a higher propensity to purchase online, I'm not going to recommend store visits to you. It'll make me more successful. You will have a better experience. If you have a very low propensity to purchase trousers or shoes of a particular kind, I'm not going to recommend them to you, especially if you've told me the reason why. Optimization, next best action, machine learning, they're all being used to predict behavior. But what if the last experience you had was appalling or amazing? Wouldn't these emotions have a key impact of future behavior? It's irrefutable evidence that this works. Ru, are you still there, my friend?
Still here. I'm going nowhere. Thanks, Jim. Yeah, I think that's fascinating, and really bringing the two sets of capabilities together. Hopefully for all the marketeers on the call, you will recognize that, and it's to my mind, I've worked in this world for over 15 years. It makes sense. irrefutable evidence here, really, talking about organizations that actually focus on their customer experience will achieve an increase in their revenue. And it's being able to use that customer experience as that next battleground to compete on. Forrester are talking about that superior customer experience brings in over 5 times more revenue. So it's being able to focus on it. And then, with what Jim's taken you through there, which is fascinating, bringing that data together to make it actionable in those marketing campaigns and really drive through that personalization is, I believe is a real step change in how you can make a difference from your customer engagement point of view.
Agreed. It's we've spoken about this before. It's not just using customer experience to improve servicing or customer care. It's actually using that feeling, that emotion to improve the entire experience, not just the channel.
Guys, that was really, really insightful stuff and great to hear both about VOC, CDPs, and then crucially how they can be used together. And I guess like a lot of people listening in to you both talk, the approach makes a lot of sense. I'm wondering if you, perhaps Rue, firstly, could outline some of the real tangible benefits of bringing the VOC data into a CDP.
Absolutely. So one of the fundamental aspects here is, I believe, is bringing that next best action to the fore. So in Jim's demo that he walked through there, being able to provide an opportunity to recover a customer, being able to send them down a different marketing channel based on a poor experience, I think is just one facet of being able to make VOC data live and be actionable, not just from an operational point of view where our data normally sits, but within a CDP to help inform where customers could be looked after in a slightly different way. And it's actually bringing in a different lens to the data within a CDP and actually layering across that insight and sentiment to drive next best actions around loyal customers or detractors or customers who've had a poor experience. Typically from what we see, the VOC data is quite operational, and there'll be operational processes around low sentiment or low scores that perhaps a contact center will invoke a process to recover them. But that almost sits in a siloed environment to the broader overarching approach to customer engagement, which is where I think blending the VOC with the overarching data within the CDP has a great opportunity to make a massive difference. I'm sure Jim's got a point of view on that as well.
I agree completely. The two key benefits from my perspective is being able to activate and use that customer feedback in a much more strategic way than before. So, for example, if you want to understand the micro influences you have, whether the word of mouth recommendation has quite a big impact upon your business, that's all direct customer feedback that you're not going to get just from a clicked link. And secondly is being able to actually flip and pivot the actual results from any angle whatsoever. If I know that you have had a great experience, Rue, but your partner who you live with has not, it may fundamentally change how I engage you. We always talk about how do I create good customer relationships, but I don't know many organizations that have perfected the how do I fix broken relationships strategy yet. So acquisition versus retention, I completely agree.
Okay, great. And I think before we go on to some questions that have come in from the audience, there's something I wanted to ask, I think Jim initially, that's for businesses that already have customer feedback that they're not really using. Are you able to take, I guess, their historical customer feedback and bring that together as well as what's happening kind of in the moment?
Absolutely is the short answer, and that's one of the first things through the early discovery with clients that we'd be trying to get hold of. The historical relationship and historical feedbacks that you have either through any review platform or whatever, even if it doesn't allow for the benefit of the natural language processing, we would want to get hold of that history. We would ingest that into the customer data platform, and I'm sure Rue can talk to how we would then historically parse that information.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's important to differentiate between the type of feedback that CXM get, which is post-interaction, our data and insights typically consumed within the organization. And we analyze it using our sentiment engine, pull out topics and insights, and then via an API along with structured metadata associated with the customer, pass that into the CDP itself. And that would be able to enrich the existing customer data that you have using that customer identifier, and then add in the insights and the topics and the scores that have been talked about. So, we are a cloud-based software company, so integrations are pretty straightforward to us.
Okay, great. So there's a question from Kirsten. She's asking you, Rue, if you can recommend any sentiment tools already out there which can be implemented to gain insight from our customer experiences.
Yeah, sorry. We've got one, Kirsten, so happy to talk to you about ours. So yeah, at the heart of the product itself is called Rantom Rave. At the heart of that is a sentiment engine, and it's been designed and honed to really understand the sentiment of an interaction, be it in a contact center, from a digital point of view, face to face. So happily follow that conversation up with you. That wasn't a canned question either.
No. A couple of people are asking whether there's a recording of this. Yes, the on-demand version will be made available shortly after the conclusion of the webinar. A question from Nahal. This one probably goes to you initially as well, Rue. Why do you think marketers aren't leveraging the voice of the customer in their overall CX programs?
It's a great question. Great question. I asked myself that one. It's interesting. So, the types of buyers that, from our experience, would look to invest in a VOC program. They're a customer experience director that would probably sit within the CMO's business unit. But typically the conversations that we'll have are customer experience director and then operational performance-based programs. Not as often as we'd like. We would have those conversations with the CMO and the marketing director. I think there is an opportunity here for a step change because, when we are providing or initiating those feedback programs, we are an extension of a marketing program. We are touching the customers, with the branding associated with that organization. And I think it is a crucial area that more marketeers need to look at in terms of being able to understand even more about the customer, which to the awesome demo that Jim's gone through, by adding in more customer data, that voice of the customer can help you from a conversion point of view from your marketing campaigns. You are taking that data, that voice of the customer data, you're adding it to existing data. You can become more targeted and create more personalized experiences for your email campaigns, your mobile campaigns, your digital campaigns. I'd love to see it more and more. But it's interesting that we will typically speak to customer experience directors and the operation rather than kind of to the left to marketing and then in from there. I kind of answered the question, but that's just from our point of view, our experience.
Sorry, Jim, did you want to chip in there?
I was just going to say that it's a very similar conversation to when marketeers separate their channels. So if I'm emailing you, Linus, and I'm not aware that you are visiting my website because that's a different team, that's a different department, I'll actually never know if my emails are working. So for years, organizations have tried to bring their data together, not very effectively until the advent of a customer data platform. But being able to share metrics around the entire organization, the customer experience management team benefits immensely from knowing if the product was shipped late, if it was in stock, if the price had changed. Those numbers, they come from other systems. So joining it all together, it's not just about channels, it's also about strategies.
Okay, great. I think time for final question. We'll direct this one to Jim from Jennifer. For marketing teams that don't have specialist data analysts, how can this work for them?
So it's a very good question, Jen. Thank you. One of the challenges that everybody has, no matter what you do for a living, is how can I do more without becoming an absolute expert technically, because we use more and more software, more and more tools. Being a data statistician is not required for marketing. If you have the right tools and the right platforms that were built for non-technical people, you should be able to do maybe 90% of what you aspire to do. The other 10% with experience. If you think back to when you first used a tool and how capable you are with it now, it's because it has been designed for non-technical people. So if you're out in the marketplace looking at CDPs, you want one that's non-technical. Otherwise, you end up recruiting data analysts, not marketeers.
Okay, great. Anything to add on that, Roo?
Jim covered that very well, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah,
all
100%.
Right. Well, that's fine. I mean, we've just gone over the hour slightly, which isn't the problem, but probably means we need to think about closing the session there. I'd like to thank our presenters for today. So it's Roo Golding from Upland Customer Experience Management. Thanks, Roo. And Jim Kelly from BlueVenn. Thanks, Jim. We really hope you enjoyed the sessions, and there's some questions that we haven't quite answered there, but we'll be following up on those. And as we mentioned at the start, there'll be an on-demand version of this webinar available. Feel free to listen to that and share it with colleagues. And finally, I'd like to thank you, the audience, for joining us today and taking part in the poll question and some great questions for the Q&A there at the end. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you again at future webinars hosted by London Research. Thanks a lot. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Stay safe.
Thank you all. Bye.